Good morning. Thank you all for getting in here so quickly and early this morning. I really appreciate it. We have a panel group discussion here, and I really do hope that in a few minutes it opens up to your discussions. As you know, we released Casper Focus in April. And by the way, my name is Dave Saltmarsh. I joined Jamf. I signed my contract the day Casper Focus was released because they knew how jazzed I would be about it, but I didn't get to know about it until I signed my NDA. So literally the day I signed my NDA was the day Casper Focus was released, and I joined in a few days later. And we've found some people that are out there trying to implement Casper Focus and have gotten to a point at each of their locations, and they're going to share their stories. I have some questions, but I really do hope in a few minutes that it gets to what you're interested in and what they're dealing with. And absolutely, if we get to the point where there's somebody else who is doing something different or further along or wants to share that, I absolutely would love to hear your stories also. So thank you for coming this morning. I'm going to let our panelists introduce themselves, give you a little bit of where they're coming from and what they have in the ways of technology. And
okay.
If you don't mind, Brenda?
Sure. I'm Brenda Berzegaard. I work at the Fair School downtown here in Minneapolis. We have a one-to-one program, and grades K-3 are iPads. We have about 250 of those, and then grades 9 through 12 have MacBook laptops, and there's about 350 of the laptops. Previously, I was teaching middle school science for about 3 years in a iPad environment once those came to our school, and excited about Casper Focus. I've only got about a week or two under my belt with actually using it and getting feedback from teachers. I waited until the update of iOS 7 and configurator and updating the JSS, so that happened all in mid-September, and there's a bit of a time period of trying to figure everything out because there just wasn't any literature on how to do anything. So.
Thank you.
My name is Shane Wheeler. I'm Director of Technology and Learning for Linville-Sully School District. Smaller district. My job is basically, I do a little bit of admin stuff as far as like assessments and technology integration and kind of like a floater for initiatives that we're doing within the school district. And then the other side is doing technology and technology integration. I introduced Casper Focus to my elementary staff last spring, right after it came out, and we've been slowly rolling it into a couple of classrooms just this fall. We have about 100 iPads at the elementary level mostly, and I just gave it to a couple of my more advanced teachers that were wanting it. So eventually we'll probably have it in all the classrooms, but right now we're just trying it with a couple of my, piling it with a couple of the more proficient teachers right now because we get feedback on what we need to change and do before we move on to the next one.
I'm Sandy Hinding. I'm from West St. Paul Schools. We have about 1,800 iPads. All of them are supervised or were using institutional model. All of our one-to-ones are under 13. So we spent the summer supervising, and then iOS 7 kind of shot us in the foot for that. So I've had some interest from teachers. I have one teacher that tried it out a little bit, but about half of her class had done iOS 7 OTA. So we're just re-supervising everything and getting ready. So I'm kind of looking for pilot teachers right now.
All right. I'm John Wetter. I'm the Technical Services Manager with Hopkins Public Schools, so here in the Minneapolis area. We have in our school district about 4,000 OS 10 computers and about 3,000 iPads. In our junior highs, we're a one-to-one iPad district, and our elementary schools are cart-based. So we're closing in on one-to-one with the elementary schools, but they are based in the classroom. They're not going home with the students like they are in our junior high program. And also at the high school, we have a mix of a lot of different technologies happening to help work with the, enabling the different types of classrooms that we're running up there, whether it be a flipped classroom, whether it be just a rich technology classroom, whether it be a mostly online learning type of a class. So we've got a lot of different styles of teaching and learning happening there that we're trying to enable different things with. So that's kind of the makeup of where we're at.
Excellent, thank you. So Again, I'm fearful of grabbing a mic and talking for 20 minutes, so I will ask 1 or 2 questions, and I would love for some other people to come in and have this. I know some of you have implemented other projects in the past. You've rolled things out. I'm interested in how you're currently rolling this out as far as what team is involved with you. Perhaps you're the only person doing this. Perhaps you're trying to convince other people. Maybe you've gone about this and you've got other people as part of your team trying to get this up and going. And I'm just interested in how you work, what your relationship, we have different people. We have some IT, we have some teachers. What's your relationship with the other people in either IT or curriculum to actually try to get this up and running? And whoever would like to get started.
Well, I guess at Hopkins, we work, IT works very closely with our digital content team, which is our instruction folks. So what we've decided to do is over the entire district to really have that team in place. This is an entire initiative for our district. It's not just, we're buying iPads. What we've really done is wanted to start from the base up and say, this is a digital content initiative, whatever that device is that goes there. We really have that conversation as a fairly device agnostic conversation. But we're really looking at it's a digital learning piece. So it's delivering content, interactive through digital means. And we work very closely with the digital content team, which are teachers that are, most of them, a 0.75 or a 0.8 technology integration, but we've been very purposeful of trying to keep them with at least 1 foot still in the classroom so that they're still seeing that delivery as it's happening and keep that connection back to the classroom. So we work very closely with those folks, and that's, the back and forth there is, I think, what makes it a strong program, is because we're hearing directly from what's happening in the classroom as we're implementing this. So, what's working, what are teachers interested in doing, what is that missing piece teachers are looking for that maybe we can help with. For us, that's been a very good conversation.
Great, and if anybody else adds in too, perhaps even to the level of detail of who's doing what. For instance, if you're doing any PD with the teachers, who's adding the classes, who's adding in the apps to be added in, anything along with Casper Focus of getting it up and running, or are you literally doing almost everything?
For the most part, it's just me. I work with my principal as far as with the curriculum and the PD, and we have an admin team, and we talk about when we're going to do PD and so on. And we've groomed a couple of the teachers that are running Casper. They do a lot of iPad PD specifically because they use the iPad a lot more in their classrooms than say some other ones. Right now, I have 1 student helper that I'm bringing on that I'm training, how to supervise the iPads and how to use Apple Configurator and then actually load classes into Casper and so on. And he's going to kind of be my go-between because he has some extra time, and I'm trying to groom students is the best way that I can do it, because I don't really have, in a small school district, we don't have teachers that have a lot of free time because they wear multiple hats. So I'm trying to grow a kind of a student-run initiative somewhat on that, so that they can talk to the teachers, because our elementary and middle school are closely together. So they share a common area. So that's been what I'm trying to grow as far as that. But for the most part, it's just been me.
I kind of am doing it both ways. I've gone directly to the teachers just to look for interest, and then most of our one-to-ones are in the magnet program, and so those schools have integration people that are also part of the magnet program. So then I'm working with them to look for good use where it would fit in, where there's need. Although I have to say that one of the main reasons that we chose to supervise and that we are excited about the idea of Casper Focus is for online assessment. Because I know that right now we're signed up to do map testing over the secure browser this winter. So we're kind of waiting to see whether they come out with an app that's effective that we can use the iPads for testing rather than having to pull out computers for that. So that was one of our main drives in getting everything supervised this summer.
I don't know if excited is the right
word. Well, excited, it's never exciting. Well, it can be exciting.
Yeah.
As far as the actual management of the iPads and putting the apps on and supervising them, I take care of all of that, but I really want teacher input for everything that goes onto the iPads. So we do have some rubrics where the teachers actually think about how am I going to use this in the classroom, when am I going to use this in the classroom, and what standards does this app help me teach. And then there's a whole, like a scope and sequence of what time of year. So I think it's really important to use apps that are meaningful and not just put on apps because they're free.
Cool. And my last prompting question then, before I go out, is you've started to say it, Sandy, is the motivating factor. What's driving the desire to use Casper Focus currently from either your perspective or maybe what you've heard from teachers, and particularly if you've had a teacher use it for a day and then all of a sudden think about how they want to use it. Very curious on the motivation for why people want to have Casper Focus.
Well, you know, technology is going to enable you to personalize and give you more freedom, and you don't have to have the traditional looking classroom. So that's kind of what's motivating us, is that especially at the elementary level, you know, kids move around a lot, and we want to give them the iPad and give them the freedom. The problem is that apps appear on there that they shouldn't, you know, Angry Birds, and some of those are reward apps like for other time, but some of those are not. So the big thing is for teachers to give the kids the iPad, let them work around the room and so on, and then still know that they're on what they should be on. We also use it because we do quite a few online assessments, like you said. I know MAP is supposed to be coming out with an iPad, one that they announced in June, but we do Dibbles assessment online, and we use our iPads for that, and so that we can lock it into that app. Or there's different online things that go along with our curriculum, be it math or reading, that are like informal or formal assessments that we can lock into those browsers. But it's also just a management tool, because when you get enough iPads in your room and they're first graders or kindergartners, they don't tell you that the battery's dead until it's dead. And with the app, the teacher can quickly look and say, I need to grab these 3 iPads and charge them right away, as opposed to trying to gather them all up, keep them in a spot, and then charging them all in at night.
I could add to that too. The only grade level currently that's using Casper Focus is kindergarten. And previous to this year, I know that a lot of the kindergarten teachers, we have 3 of them with 20 students each, only used iPads as more of like a station, where maybe 5 students would be working on them at a time. Just from a management perspective, they're kindergartners and they get really off task quickly. But now with Casper Focus, they're able to actually do whole class activities or instruction.
As far as initial reasons for looking at Focus, for us it was also assessment was right up there. As this last summer we were pretty much right on the middle of the fence of whether we wanted to move to the NWEA MAP online version, which would work on the iPads, which you have that kind of moment of terror of now we have to figure out how to do it completely over again. But so that was one of the pieces we were looking at there. And of course, assessment is always coming up as far as something that, you know, we're giving students all of these devices. We need it to be able to do assessment too. And of course, the companies that run assessments haven't gotten there yet. I feel like we're getting close, but, you know, kind of from the IT side of it, all I've seen at this point is lots of promises of that. But I have a feeling when it gets here, it's going to get here fast and now, kind of a thing. And I just can't imagine running around a room and pushing the home button 4 times on a whole bunch of iPads. So Focus is going to be something that when assessment does get there on the iPad, I don't know how you would do assessment in any sort of numbers without it, without completely going insane.
I also think that the white passcode thing is going to be really, really useful for our teachers once we get it all rolled back out, because I'm sure that's pretty much a stop, you know, drop dead until they find a tech to do that for them with Casper. So kind of it's an add-on feature, but it's going to really be awesome for teachers once that's working.
Now, I love my job, so I don't want to be the person to ask any other questions that might bring out pain points. So does anybody want to ask any other type of question, or perhaps like that pain point of the process? Because I don't want to ask that.
So you talk about rolling it out to just a few teachers. How does that work when the students switch classes? So like if the other teachers are not using Casper Focus and the teacher that they're leaving the class from is and has forgotten to unfocus them, have you run into anything like that?
Not at this point. You know, we're using it quite a bit in our elementary schools where it's either station-based already in the elementary school, so it's, if they're not one-to-one, which a lot of our elementary school teachers have said, we don't really need that, you know, at this point. We do a lot of it stations, you know, we'd love to have 6, you know, and they'll be focused literally on something, doing that station, another station will be doing something else in the classroom. So you're really focusing for a specific purpose, you know, so the students aren't taking the iPads and going to another classroom, or if they do switch schools or go in and out, it's a room-based iPad at that point, so it's not assigned to a particular student. So we haven't run into that from that point. The big piece where that's going to be is once we get up into our one-to-one program, the junior high and the high school. Those schedules are changing on a daily basis. As far as, you know, we have a very mobile student population in Hopkins, and so students enrolling and unenrolling from the district, let alone students making schedule changes within the day. So before we're going to be able to really get into the junior high schools, the student information system importer is going to have to become much more robust. Yeah.
In the limited use that we've had, we did have an experience where she focused the class, but there were a couple kids that were at home sick. And when they came in the next day, they instantly focused. And there was like, oh, so how do we've already unfocused. So they actually had to take those 2 devices and focus and unfocus in order to get them working again. So, you know, yes, there's definitely things we have to think through. I'm pretty sure that when I set up her classes, I didn't put time limits on them, because if you have time limits and then they do an adjusted schedule, all those times will be off. So I'm still kind of thinking through how all that works. Right. And then the participation in what information goes from student information into Active Directory, because our students are enrolling their devices, so their AD is populated, but the information that came in from AD to the iPad, so the teacher can look at the device and she can look at the device names, which are useless to her, you know, numbers 1 through whatever, or she can look at their user ID, which is their first name. And so then she said, well, I'd rather look at it by last name, but that's not how we did it. So definitely there's technical issues with how do you want to be able to view them? What's the useful information that I need to go back to the people that are getting information out of SIS and putting it in an AD? It's all a lot of things to sort of just be, without touching anything, just think through how is this going to work.
You mentioned the, you know, focusing on students that were not in class. That's something, yeah, that has come up with us as well, that our JSS is exposed externally. So you had kids who were home sick and their iPad focused, you know, while they're sitting at home sick. So yeah, that's something to think about.
Yeah, I mean, ours are all class-based, so that teacher is going to be aware of it. Our iPads don't move around from class to class. And then the other thing is that as the head tech person, I just have a smart list, and I have a class that's just based on every computer, every iPad that's supervised that I can see, so that if they just send me an email, I can unfocus it. So if a student were to leave a classroom and then go to another classroom, as long as that teacher has the Focus app, then they can unfocus that student too if you set it up. So.
Ours is in a cart-based kind of model. I mean, it's K3, so the students stay in the classroom, so it hasn't really been an issue for us.
And that actually came up yesterday after my session, and I had a librarian come to me, and the idea was for every class you add an extra account in that could always go in to have all classes. And so she said, you know, if that needed to happen, they could go in. And I do think you brought up a great point, because they just added that feature for being able to do groups of students instead of one or all. Now we can do groups. Right. The idea, and it's a feature request, of being able to say, and you know, it's like, oh yeah, what if kids are not only absent or at home, but maybe they're in band, so they're in school. Okay, but they're purposely in another room. So deselecting students, and I got around that right now by realizing these two weren't, and so, you know, but you don't want to have to do that for every instance. So
Right.
I think you brought up a great point, and if you notice from the last thing, is we heard these things like needing groups, and then our development team, they got that right in there. So I think that's the kind of stuff we need to hear about. You had a question?
Yeah, I'm in higher education, so it's a little different. And I'm finally getting them to say, yes, we're going to try iPads. I have Casper. I have like 100 seats of Focus. What is the best advice you can give me? Because it'll probably be me, and that's it, trying to either train, teach, implement. Is there a few things that you can give me to say, okay, stay away from this, or look at this, or these are things that I've come across?
What have been your sticking points, or?
Well, I guess one of the very first things with us is it was, thank goodness we had really good smart groups already in place for all these different, for our groupings of iPads, you know, had, as far as from the JSS management already up front, we had that done. So now, you know, a teacher can call and say, yeah, I want to add this class to Focus, or, you know, one of our tech integrators are out in another building working with somebody and say, hey, so-and-so really wants to try it. That can come right back to a request through our IT ticketing system, and we can have that class in there and the app, you know, rolled out to that teacher's iPad or to all the iPads that day. So, yeah, so smart groups, to have it there just ready to, all right, this classroom's ready to go, just add it to the group, call it, you know, maybe your class isn't called the exact same thing as what you've called the smart group, you know, from your internal IT purposes. But for us, it was, yeah, having those groups ready to go so that when the teacher is ready, it's they ask for it, they get it now. So there isn't that gap in between where it's well, maybe I don't need it. I'll do something else because they can't get that to me. You know, really make that fast.
I would say the biggest sticking point that I had this year is all the upgrading. You had Casper Suites going to 9.0. You had Configurator going from like 1.3 to 1.3.1 to now 1.4. And those are you need to think through, like maybe if your iPads are already supervised, that won't be a big sticking point. But for me, the supervising of the iPads first so that you can have them in Casper. The iPads have to be supervised by Apple Configurator to put them to use Casper Focus, and just figuring out what you're going to give them and allow them to do and what they're not going to allow them to do. One of the bigger sticking points that we have is that we want the iPad to be a very mobile device, and we want kids creating original content for it, which means taking movies and doing pictures. But when you can, at least on my system anyway, when you supervise an iPad, the teacher can't take that iPad and plug it into her machine and take the pictures down. You have to come up with a different solution. So we came up with, and I didn't think of it, I got it off of Googling, that was using Dropbox. So you got to think of ways to get your content off if a teacher wants it, because otherwise they got to come and find you or the person that set it up. You got to go grab your supervising computer and set it up that way, and that really limits what you can do with the iPad. So you got to come up with those solutions like that. You need to experiment a little bit with how it plays within your system as far as your security and so on, and what control you're willing to give them and whatnot. That's been the biggest sticking point, was that, because you got different profiles that you're putting on that once you supervise them. And that's the tougher part. The app itself is really easy and really straightforward. So
I think setup is a big thing that you need to take into consideration. Figuring out how you're going to get your smart groups. So I created an enrollment profile for each class, and then for each class I put that enrollment profile on that set of iPads. So.
Excellent, thanks. I'm going to come up around.
As you're speaking about having a conversation with your teachers and what they specifically want from this, how you set up the groups and the classes and times, were there trainings or meetings or sessions? I mean, how what were your specific steps in communicating with them and rolling this out to classrooms so that not only did teachers, understand what they would be getting with this new tool, but how to use all of these features? Because I know, at least at our school, I know what I am able to do as a tech person, but communicating that out to my teachers when we only have one staff meeting a month dedicated to anything technology is hard. Mm-hmm. So what did you do?
I think it depends on the size of who you're working with. I work at a small school, so I meet with the teachers on more of a grade level based, and that's when we talk about what apps, and then I show them some new things about the iPad, and I would show them Casper Focus. But if you're working in a larger situation, you might want to get people together. But I also think a lot of the teachers are really excited about what they can do, and they really want to learn how to utilize the tools. So they will, like if you host a meeting that's voluntary, more than likely most of them will show up.
We set aside PD time, not a lot, but, and then I just modeled it. So they all had iPads. I had already supervised them. I'd already put got them in a group for Casper Focus, and then as we're going through and doing PD on other stuff that was iPad related, then I could change their apps. I could focus them in on particular apps and show them what you could do if you were instructing somebody with it, and that tended to get their attention. Once again, we're in a smaller school, so we try to, like, when I go to give it to a classroom teacher, then I usually set aside a time to come in and during their prep and show them how to use it, and we talk about how different ways that they can do it, because, well, I don't have a lot of teachers, so I'm afforded that time. So that's basically how I dealt with it.
I basically just sent out an email to my building techs and said, share this with your staff. I created a Google Doc and said, if you have interest in this, this is what I need from you. If you know specific apps already that you'd want to focus on, put it in the spreadsheet, try to give me what iPads you want to focus, what classes, and I got 2 teachers right away with no advertising other than just a broad email that went out. And I didn't really want a very big, number of people right away because I hadn't really tried it out yet. But I think it'll spread once we have some success with it. And it'll just be, every situation I'm sure is going to be unique as to what they need to have set up and how hard it is to get the right iPads in the group. So.
We've done it a couple different ways, both with just communicating out to our building techs and our media specialists in our buildings. But the most successful piece for us has probably been our technology integration team. Again, our focus on PD is really a just-in-time PD. We do have a couple days throughout the year that are dedicated to it, but most of this type of learning is really that just-in-time learning, where I have this need in my classroom, and we can say, hey, we actually have a tool that will fit that perfectly for you. So that's really where most of our classes have come from at this point.
Yeah. Yeah. We have about 1,000 iPads 7 through 12 in our district, and over the last month I've had a couple of teachers kind of demoing Casper Focus. And you touched on many of the things. We had, a kid go to band and get locked down and some of those things. I'm still struggling with how to easily import or bring in my classes and get them set to the bell schedule and stuff like that. It's not intuitive yet.
Right.
And we have a personal ownership. And I think one of the things I haven't heard yet, but the big piece for our teachers is the classroom management piece, obviously. I mean, maybe it's inherent in that, but because we have a personal ownership model, kids can have virtually any apps they want on there. And you said kindergartners don't stay focused. I can tell you seniors don't stay focused either. And so, and right now I like the simplicity of the app itself for teachers. There's not a lot to muck up or confuse them. But with the same token, I'm wondering if there's other features that you might want to see down the road with this particular tool that teachers might use.
And to add to that, because he started off, if you could also mention, how did you, each of you, get your students in? What did you use to do your students? And then I think it followed up at the end of what other features would you want?
With us, yeah, it's mostly been class-based at this point, so we haven't done a whole lot of student stuff just because we haven't been able to do that SIS import until we can make that a not real time but near real time, like a couple times a day scheduled type of a transfer with that student information system. It's not going to happen in our
Adding kids in and taking them out as they come and go.
yeah. Yep, because, you know, to the same point of the focusing students that are in band, well, kids are changing their schedules in the middle of the day. You know, they're meeting with their counselor at second hour, and all of a sudden, well, your new schedule starts third hour. So, you know, those types of changes are happening. And, you know, so to go up into our secondary schools where that's just the way it is, you know, as far as changing schedules and students moving around, I mean, we need that, you know, student information system importer to be basically all of the time. So,
Is that your other feature also?
well, I mean, that's one of the big pieces as far as feature, you know, a lot of the other pieces are, you know, that it's some of the Apple technology pieces that need to keep up with it. Like, can we focus to these 3 apps? Mm-hmm. You know, can we focus to Safari, but these 2 websites? Mm-hmm. You know, we're going to be doing research today, but you can go everywhere except Wikipedia. You know, it's, you know, doing a lot of pieces like that. That's probably the next big pieces, yeah, but I'm hesitant to ask for too much though too, because I do, like you mentioned, I love the simple interface right now. You know, it's, you know, sure, we can line both sides of the screens with buttons to do different things, but now you're just putting more buttons on, you know. So yeah, most of the pieces for us are, yeah, that behind the scenes student information piece. And then it's the, you know, can you do 3 apps or 3 websites or something like that?
I heard the same thing. Can I focus on 2 apps? And can I focus on a specific ebook rather than just focusing on iBooks? So,
Right.
Same thing.
Yeah. Like I want to be able to go into iBooks, but then also to Evernote to make notes on it, you know, something like that. Yeah.
We don't put our students in, so I don't really have an answer for that. But yeah, the problem that we face is somewhat like that, because we're getting kids using Evernote, or they use something else and they want to switch back and forth. And if you're focused on one, then you can't. Excuse me. I mean, like you said, I don't know if I'd want it to do too much more. I mean, I'm sure that our teachers would like to be able to view the iPad screens in real time, but that just would clog up our network. It's the simplicity of it is what makes it so great, in my opinion, just because there's not a lot of training that really needs to be done. Once you've used it, it's really intuitive. So.
We also don't really have the issue with class schedules and changing, because kindergartners. But one feature request that some of the teachers were kind of asking about was being able to put some sort of a message on the screens so that they have to like look up and pay attention to something they need to say. So that was one of the features.
Great. Add a question here, and then I'll check again if there's others.
Yeah, that was actually, I just wanted to go on the end of that. That's actually something that's been mentioned to a couple of our teachers, of even the ability to, not a message even on the screen, but you know, from a teacher being able to do a push notification message, you know, almost like your iPhone, you get, you know, your USA Today, you know, news alert, or your CNN news bulletin, whatever, you know, to be able to have a science teacher, you know, don't forget to bring your goggles because it's lab day today, you know, something like that, to be able to push that out. So that's something that's been requested from our teachers' side as well, to be able to do those types of messages out, you know, in the one-to-one iPads. That's an important piece, because they are going home with the parents. Or, you know, don't forget to have that field trip, you know, slip signed, you know, tomorrow, or you're stuck sitting in my room all day, you know.
Do you think kids are missing out on being efficient with the iPads using Casper Focus and like real world experiences they're going to have at some point when they're not in school?
With being able to focus like different groups of people, you wouldn't have to focus everybody in the class. You could just focus on Johnny, who's being a troublemaker right now. So the other students can make good decisions and they don't have to be focused in the app, but you can also help guide and teach the other ones that maybe can't handle the control.
I think one of the conversations that Dave and I had was the idea of the kids walk in the class and maybe the only thing you use Casper Focus is for that first 5 minutes of class. Just come in the room, get into Schoology, that's it. And then as soon as you've got everybody doing that, then you're not focused anymore. Another thing, Casper should come up with an app that doesn't do anything except put up a black screen. It would be like a lock, it would be an app, you'd focus to the app, but all it does is just go.
So to answer that, we cannot submit an app to the App Store that does nothing. Yeah. You can't. So finding an app.
All right, make it a little kangaroo that hops.
Yeah, there's a red light, but you can make an in-house app. I made an in-house app of just a teacher wanted me to make an app that just was like this. So I don't know much about app creation, but it's pretty easy to make an app that does nothing. I mean, you drop a photo and you save it, so anybody that has the software can make an app that does nothing. We just can't put it on the Apple Store.
I mean, I think you have a good point. There was a conversation at the first day about is it a social learning problem or is it a tech problem? And I understand that kind of concern, but if you've ever been in like a kindergarten or a first grade room or a preschool room, and the first time you give them an iPad, especially depending on your economic background of those children, they will, I mean, they're super excited. And they're going to want to touch and do everything. So earlier in the year, you're probably going to maybe use Casper more to keep them locked in on whatever they're supposed to do. And then wean them off of it or do less of it. I mean, I don't, as far as I know, and what I've seen it in the classroom, our teachers aren't using Focus every minute of every second that they're using the iPad. But it is good to bring kids back that are not. You know, it's good that you can tell the difference between a kid doing research over here and the kid that's playing, pick on Angry Birds or some other game over here. That's a much different hand motion than what they're doing, and you can visually see that and then lock that student in, as opposed to having to lock everybody else in.
Do you want to add anything? Okay. And I did have way up here first. Okay, we should have paid for 2 mics.
I never heard of Casper Focus until yesterday, and I've tried to read some things. Questions I have are pretty basic. It is, what are the system requirements in terms of software that you have to be on? Like, I'm hearing you have to be, I think, on 8.7. I'm hearing that you have to use Apple Configurator. We don't. We use Meraki. Is that a big deal? How does the licensing work? You know, it's kind of the step before this discussion is before we can evaluate it in our district, I have to know more details about how does it work underlying. You know, it
Right.
sounds like it all goes back to the JSS, which is swell, but I have to hear that, and I can't find it on your website. You have all the glitter. You don't have, here's what you have to do to get into it.
Hopefully
Yeah.
there is a getting started that I'll help you find, but I know you all can answer those questions.
Yeah, it's JSS at 8.7. The iPad, to get all the good stuff, has to be supervised. So whether that's, you know, you threw it into configurator and just supervise it, and then you manage it with, you know, whatever your MDM, Meraki, whatever you're using. Then you can use Focus. It's really all just in the JSS. You know, new things, of course, coming along at iOS 6 and iOS 7. But really it's supervised iOS 6 device, your JSS on 8.7, and push notification is working and you're ready to go.
License fee, and this is where the salespeople don't want me talking, but a Casper Focus is a value-added add-on to the Casper suite. So if you own iOS licenses, which are per seat, you get Casper Focus with it. There's no extra cost. I like to say that part. That's fine. And there's a gentleman here in the middle somewhere. Nope. Go. Sorry. Throw your hand up now if you do want to ask a question, so I don't miss that side. Okay, got it.
Okay, my question is, do you think SIF would help with the SIS?
SIF.
Oh, SIF.
Define the letters for us.
So it's the school, what is it? School Information Framework, or Interoperability Framework, yeah. We tried to implement SIF several years ago and have since abandoned SIF. For us, SIF has been an unfulfilled promise. It's a great framework, but we found that the framework was too loose, and basically anybody could slap a sticker on their product and to say, SIF compliant, yes, now we can put a bid in. And that's about all their compliance was worth. So we're using a different solution now that actually does all of our student, our auto provisioning of students and staff, that automatically pulls it from Infinite Campus, which is our SIS, and from our HR Fin system that does all that auto provisioning for Active Directory and Google, and we can plug whatever we want into that. So yes, that it's doing the SIF function that you're talking about, but it's not SIF because we found SIF to be a great big black hole to throw money into.
What do you use?
The product's called OmniID.
Okay. And my suggestion to whoever has Casper Suite is contact your support or someone and let us know what you use for your student information system, because we do have people working directly with those vendors, because having bought dozens of software that was all SIF compliant, it really took me working with my individual SIS and then the software and getting that working. But Jamf is definitely interested in what you're using so that we can communicate and get it working cooperatively with them, because it's more of a direct effort.
Yeah, and I sound kind of a downer on SIF, but that's just, it's frankly, this was a long project, and we saw the promise in it, so it was as much just disappointment that it couldn't work as advertised as much as it was.
And what we're wanting to do is live updating when someone in your counseling office adds a student, they're in the classes, and how we can get all that working and get everybody to talk nicely. I'm big on getting whoever used to do something involved in doing it.
Yes.
So getting the communication right now when the student's enrolled or moved to class, make sure those counselors know that somebody if I'd be giving some of them access to the JSS, but if you don't want to do that, make sure they know who to communicate to make that happen for the teacher.
Mm-hmm.
I just have a functionality question. So say I focus a classroom on one particular app, but then I, as the teacher, want to show them something else through the smartboard or whatever with my iPad. When I leave the Casper Focus app, does that unfocus them, or it maintains it?
Nope, they remain focused there because it's a push notification based. So it's you're pushing the focus and then you're pushing the unfocus. So you can push the focus, do your piece of, whether it's on the interactive whiteboard or whatever you happen to be doing, and then go back in. Because that's one of the pieces, and we found that out, early on, is especially in the elementary schools, the teacher doesn't necessarily have an iPad themselves. What they've been doing and their normal function is, they're grabbing the iPads, they grab iPad 1 off the cart, and that's what they're then demonstrating to the student and handing it off, to another student to start using. So, for Focus, that works great. You open it up, the teacher logs into Focus, they're gonna do whatever they're doing, whether it be focusing to an app, or whether it just be, locking the screens for now. So while I deliver the instruction to you, your eyes are up here, and then you can unfocus it, hand that iPad back off to the students, and they use it.
I would say a functionality issue that depending on how you set up your JSS, and this is a problem I ran into. It's a good thing, bad thing is that I don't want to be the only one that adds apps into the store for our JSS. for our self-service, and the teachers can add apps by hand if they want to. They have that right on their own lab. The problem is that like I had to communicate with my couple of teachers that are using Casper Focus. You have to tell me. So I put it in the JSS, because if they put it on the machine, they can't focus it unless it's in JSS. So if the teacher decides on their own that we're going to download this whatever app it is, if I don't put it in the JSS, you can't focus it. And that we've kind of got around that a little ways, is that you can give teachers access specifically just to adding apps. And I mean, it's not too complex as far as doing that. So I have like 3 elementary teachers that have access just to adding apps, because they're more aware of it than I am sometimes. And it beats them emailing me and then me going in and doing it. And so that's one nice feature of the JSS, is that you can assign just very specific roles to those people. So
Before we run up here, quick question. I'm curious on if you have Apple TVs, how you were doing them before, and have you implemented with the new feature with the Casper Focus with Apple TV and seen any benefits from that at all?
Our Apple TVs are not set up right now, so we're excited about being able to put the student work up on the screen and the teacher able to control that, but I haven't actually seen it yet.
we don't have any Apple TVs, and we'll probably get a few this year to play around with them, but we haven't done that yet because we have some network concerns.
Yes, we have Apple TVs, but we haven't gotten that far with the rollout, so.
Yeah. We've done just a little bit of proof of concept with Apple TVs itself. Mostly what teachers have been doing with it is using Reflector, the application, to be able to put their screen up onto the screen in the room, or interactive whiteboard.
Cool, thanks.
I wanted to ask you about the secure browsers for the standardized tests, because we're doing that to disastrous results right now. So I was curious if you think Casper Focus can help out with, I guess, the app being more stable. Is there any benefit to that, or is it strictly a distractibility issue?
So, and are you talking about a specific testing app,
Yeah.
a specific browser?
ERB browser is what we use. We use the ERB browser, but it keeps dropping and it'll time out and they can't go back to the test, and it's a mess right now.
You know, that's one of the pieces, and for Minnesota, so we have both the map testing, which the school district is just doing from NWEA, and the state standardized testing is AIR. So it's, and again, they've been promising the same thing of having a secure browser with it. My guess is that, yes, it might help some. How's that for an answer? And that's piece I'm hoping it's just basically going to be applicable across that from what we've seen on the desktop. Again, that's probably a pretty dangerous assumption to be making, where it's, you know, on the desktop, it's okay, make sure you've disabled every helper for everything, anything that is going to sit and might interrupt it, so that it's going to all of a sudden invalidate a question on a test because something happened on the computer, and, you know, that freaks it out, kicks the kid out, and now the proctor has to come in and either restart the test or suspend and restart the test. That's, I guess, my hope to see, is that by doing Focus, you know, locking them to that app, you're going to see that kind of stuff not happen. Again, that's a if and a hope and a when, but yeah.
Anybody want to add anything? Okay. So I was pretty excited when someone showed me the new feature that came out with 7, where we can whitelist, so you can put a profile in, so you can lock into Safari into a specific site, or you can set up a list of sites, and you can add Jimmy to that smart group, that when he goes in, he can only go to those. So right. Maybe that will be one of the solutions. Question from over on this side?
Yeah, and that's always, you know, from testing, that's always because you're the secure browser. So that's always the interesting piece, is everyone likes to keep saying that they're web-based, but they're really not, because you always can only run their specific browser, which is always just a WebKit browser, but they've done something special to it that makes your life more interesting. So,
So question is, in its current iteration, are you guys finding that the value add is worth it for the teacher and for you guys? So as the app currently exists. And then secondly, when you look at scaling it out to all of your teachers potentially, or a big portion of them, is it just relying on the SIS importer at this point, or what else will be involved with that?
And you have what, 20, 30,000 students? 40, yeah.
Yeah.
I remember.
Scaling is going to be all about the SIS, yeah. Forget the first part of what you said, but yeah, that's really the scale out of it's going to be all about the SIS import just happening, because yeah, we can have our service desk make the on request pieces, you know, for now, for elementary teachers that are just getting going, you know, joining the ranks of the ones already using it. But it's worked very well, again, the simplicity of it, but the scalability is going to be, it has to be through the SIS. Yeah.
And that first part for you, or did you believe it's the value add is worth it and going to add, you know, be what you wanted it to be?
Yeah, for the value add, yeah, absolutely. So.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, we are using it to do inventory and do self-service and the app management piece, and then this is kind of just a bonus, is the way I look at it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think the empowerment of the teachers to be able to do some of those tasks, even if it's just the battery check and the wiping passcodes, even if they don't do it for anything else than that, that's still a really nice feature to give them in their classroom to keep things rolling. So I definitely, I mean, I just put it in self-service and I'm just kind of letting it trickle out on its own, but I think it'll be worth it. But again, the creating of the classes is the big thing that we're trying to sort through now.
Yeah, and with that battery one, that was even something interesting for us at the end of last school year, the teachers that had already started using it. You know, so you do the actual piece, you know, where you charge the iPad to 75% and then completely power it off when it's going to be sitting all summer. So just, you think, yeah, you forget about those easy wins, something like that, whereas the tech in the building who teachers were doing that is, that can just, she could check in her office. So, oh, they're to 75%. I'll go down, shut them off. We're done, ready to go for the summer. You know, it's those easy wins that you just don't even think about that you can do.
Yeah, I definitely think it's worth it. There is a lot more setup involved just because you do have to plug every single device into Configurator. And at my school, we don't have a syncing cart. So I have to hand touch every single one and babysit it. But it was worth, you know, hours of work that I put into it because the teachers really like it.
I like that. I have like almost 10 more minutes. There was one over here before I come back up. I met my standards, was to try to have conversation for 50 minutes and then not go over.
Maybe you guys don't know this, but do you think it's possible to use Casper Focus in a take-home environment or a distant learning type of situation?
Yes. Anything specific? Yeah, yes. Well, as long as your JSS is publicly accessible, then after then it's just push notification. So, you know, it's one of those deals we always, you know, it's the easy test for us to always just tell kids, you know, do you get your CNN notification or do you get your USA Today news alert? Well, then yes, you're on the network and you're good. So. Yep. Right, yeah, it allows them to do that. And that's what some of the alternative classroom setups are also enabling, those sort of things. You know, we have enough teachers in our secondary schools that are comfortable with the flipped concept that now they can deliver those lesson plans. You know, it's not reinventing the wheel for that student to still be a part of the class, even if that one student is doing a hybrid of the regular class, you know, flipping some of the instruction for them so that they can still participate because they're going to be out for 2 weeks or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, the models of synchronous, asynchronous, during video, how you want to do the distance learning really ties back to that motivating factor for why you chose Casper Focus. Are you using it for just like kindergarten to really keep them on task for a few minutes, or but not keep them locked or get their attention? And would you apply those to students out of classroom? Obviously, we've had it accidental because we've had a student outside your network go in, so we know that we could do that. Do you want to do that? Why would we? And those are the user stories that we want to hear, and is there a reason for it? It's certainly possible. We want to come up with that story. Last question, perhaps, that you haven't heard, and keep in mind, we've got other people that can answer your questions, especially the what do I actually have to do to get this up and running. There are lots of us around here to just talk one-on-one with you, and they'll be around if you have more questions. But is there anything from the audience that is absolutely burning? There is? Okay, one more, and then I'll give you also, I'm going to end it with, is there something I didn't ask that you just want to really tell people?
Not really burning, and unfortunately not really Casper Focus related, but I heard a couple of you talk about teachers putting apps on. Do you have any sort of oversight in terms of the educational content on those apps? Or, because that was, for our administration, that was a very big thing, that we know what's going on there and that we know that it's educationally viable.
We trust our teachers to make the right decisions for their classroom.
The teachers at our school can't just like put apps on. They can't just like walk up and be like, hey, can you get this app on these iPads? It doesn't really work like that. There's definitely a process, and we have a rubric, and there's more thought to it than I want this app right now on the iPad.
The question was to post the rubric on the discussion, and having had several discussions already, the idea of looking at apps like we used to prior to 2010, where we looked at educational software and we looked at the value as opposed to, is it free? Those are the kind of things. She does have some of those resources. There's some really good rubrics out right now, and in addition to what she posts, I'll make sure some of the ones we're looking at are also put up there.
We put ours on a Google form too, so that they have access to it.
To answer your question, if it's free, then we really don't evaluate it all that much. I mean, there's a whole argument of gamification and all these other things. So, we put a lot of value in these teachers and a lot of value in their training and so on. So, I don't want to be over. I mean, this is my personal opinion. I don't need to be over your shoulder. I mean, I have a list of stuff that you put on there. I can pull the inventory if I want from the JSS, and if I saw an app that was questionable, then we maybe have a discussion. But for the most part, I'm not seeing any of that. And if you want to use some game that's not quote unquote educational, but there's a method behind it, then I don't have a problem. I mean, that's why we have e-walkthroughs. That's why we do PD. That's why we do all these other things. I mean, I would hope that you wouldn't go into a classroom and just see kids playing whatever games all day long. I mean, you have something more than just your teacher putting on a couple apps. That's something with their pedagogy that's really off. That's a bigger conversation on who has what apps than that.
Anything that you wanted to get out that I didn't ask or anything like that? They didn't?
I was just going to actually even follow up with that. You have some of the apps then, one app that's come up that definitely had, educational need. But, as far as understanding the technical implications of what you did is like installing something like Puffin or Rover on the iPad, because by installing Puffin or Rover, you're circumventing all of your security. Really, your SIPA filtering is being circumvented by installing something like that. And in our case, it was installed for very good reason, because of a specific piece of a curriculum just had not updated yet. It was a web-based curriculum that used Flash, and so they still needed to access that one thing. It's accessing this one thing for 1 week of the term is what they really needed it for. But then the technical understanding as well, by doing that now, your kids have been playing with Facebook. They're doing that, and instead of everything else. But there again, our teachers identified that. They're in charge of their classrooms, so they've identified it and we've been able to work through that. So.
Okay, well, I'm very grateful to the audience coming in and having questions, so I didn't have to ask them all. And I'm extremely grateful to the panel. Thank you very much.